Hello, thank you for joining me today. Really good to be back, and again with another topic. This week, I wanted to sort of talk about some things and knit a few things together that we've talked about before about language learning. And I know many of the things. Let me just check. Actually, I think there's an issue with the microphone on. Let me just check to make sure that's working. And bear with me 1 second. I apologize for this. I've got a funny feeling it's not working at all. And we will figure it out if we can get this to work. So, if you're on YouTube, can you let me know if you can hear me? Can you hear me on YouTube? Possibly not, because I'm not seeing any reaction. Oh, good. Oh, good. Because it doesn't show, weirdly, it's not showing me that there's any voice at all. Normally I get some sort of markings on the bottom, but thank you for letting me know. Good. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for the hearts and for the likes. I really appreciate it. It just helps to keep me going with this, seeing the sort of the love. So thank you so much for that. And welcome to everyone joining as well. Thank you so much. So today I wanted to really knit together a number of things that we talk about quite a lot when it comes to language learning. And one of the things that I'm very keen on is actually the need to talk about different things about language learning in different ways. And the reason is because I think that we need different ways to talk about things to appeal to and to make sense to the widest possible audience. Otherwise, what we do is we end up repeating the same things, we get bored, no one bothers listening, we all switch off, and that's kind of it. We fail at language learning. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about this topic, because I recognize that what happens is many of us will buy into a book, buy into a course, buy into whatever it is to learn a language, or even just the idea of learning a language, and we won't stick at it for very long. So one of the most common things that I come across in what I do online and with people I meet generally is, how do I learn a language and how do I stick at it? And that's kind of why I think that it's going to be a topic that is forever there. It is a little bit akin to the issue that we have with anything in life. So, I mean, I often see people on my feed on social media talking about fitness, talking about diets, talking about learning whatever. And it tends to be a similar kind of theme. It's the theme of the motivation, getting into a rhythm, but also finding a rhythm that's not just somebody else's rhythm, somebody else's way of doing it, but your own, something that makes sense to you. And sort of that builds on what I was talking about last week when I said to you that I think that we need to talk about individuals and not groups. And it's to do with the fact that actually me telling you what's good for your group doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you as the individual in that group. So if I compare you to people in your group or in one of your groups, does that help you? Does it make you feel good, bad for doing better or worse, or for making those comparisons nonstop? How does it make you feel? And how does that therefore in turn affect your motivation and your ability to learn and your ability to move forward with your studies? I would say that it doesn't, and it's not the best thing to do. So this is kind of why I think it's really important to take on board the questions and the comments that you have, and to really just talk about them. So without further ado, I want to have a look at some of the thoughts that I have here. So on YouTube, Alberta says a lack of motivation, people quitting at the first challenge. So if you want to master a language, you must know that challenges are there no matter what the result. Absolutely true, Alberto. Mut Languages says, just too time consuming for most people, probably 1,000 hours to get to a level of a 2.5-year-old. Oh dear, that's quite depressing, isn't it? So when we think of this, these are two very good things that I think we need to sort of stop for a second and just digest what they're saying. So yeah, I think that is one of the big issues, is motivation. And some people roll their eyes when you talk about motivation. It's one of those topics that I think in language learning and in many other spheres, it's been talked about to death. And it's always full of the same kind of trite, you've just got to be motivated, guys, and get with it. It's like, it doesn't quite work like that in the same way for everyone. And so this is where I'm a big fan of individual motivations and things that work for you on an authentic and real level. Because what's the point of me telling you how everything works for everyone else if it doesn't work for you? It's still either you're going to feel stupid because it doesn't work for you and it works for them, or you're going to think that I'm trying to sell you a load of nonsense because I'm telling you that you should do this and it will work. So what that means is getting used to the idea of what you put in and what you get out. Okay. So very often we're sold these ideas of just 15 minutes a day and you're going to learn a language. You're not. No one's learning a language on 15 minutes a day. I'm sorry, you're not. You're just not. I've never studied a language for 15 minutes a day and learned it. I have never done it. If you've done it, please let me know. If you've really seriously done it, let me know. I'd be very, very happy to talk to you and find out what your amazing secret is. But you're not learning a language with 15 minutes a day. It's just not. It's not happening. You need to seriously actually dedicate time to it. And 15 minutes a day, as great as it is maybe to listen to a language to keep up with doing things, to start learning a language, okay, you're gonna make some progress, but you're not gonna make necessarily the progress that you want to make. This is the thing, right? This is the important thing. 15 minutes a day, you're gonna learn a few words. Probably in that 15 minutes, you've got to sit down, you've got to prepare yourself, you've got to study, you've got to learn some words. And okay, you'll learn some things, but it's going to take you a long time. I don't know if any of you remember that whole 10,000 hours of study of any subject will make you a master of that subject, right? Hands up if you remember that. I remember everyone saying that. And it's fair enough, but 10,000 hours is a long time. That's a lot of hours, right? So if you imagine 15 minutes a day, okay, so you're talking just over an hour a week. What's that? Well, maybe nearly 2 hours a week. Maybe. What is it? It's just not that much, is it? So just the 15 minutes a day, and I hate to burst bubbles. For some languages, there may be some ways of making it work better or worse, but you need to be doing other things as well. And that's the thing, right? That's why if you see anybody who's learning a language, if you take someone like, let's take somebody who's done very well at learning languages, Luca or Lindy or whoever, and they do a good job in learning languages. There are no two ways about it. They do. You'd admire as well. She also does a great job in learning a language, and she sits down and learns a language. She sits down and learns a language. Why and how do they do it? Lydia Machova would be another good example. Okay, why and how do they do it? Well, what they do is they dedicate their lives to doing it, and they make it part of their lives. So when they learn a language well, what they do and what I've done as well in the past, and what our Professor Arguelles has done, and so many others, is to actually dedicate and make that language part of your life. And if you want to do it that way, then yeah, you're going to make relatively quick progress in terms of the months and years that you count. But in those months and years that you count, they are going to be many thousands of hours of study, of being in the language, engulfed, immersed, however you want to call it, in the language, whether it's watching things, reading things, doing things, speaking in the language, whatever it is, they're going to be doing lots of that stuff. So they're going to get to those 10,000 hours without even thinking about it, and beyond potentially. And that's the key difference. So if someone says to you 15 minutes a day, if you just do 15 minutes a day, then you've got to kind of realize what you're putting in terms of time and effort and energy, and how much you're dedicating your life to learning language, and what you can realistically get out. Because in 15 minutes a day, it's not going to be a matter of months or weeks or months or even a couple of years that you're going to notice a big difference. I'll give you an example. So 15 minutes a day, okay? I've been studying Cornish for nearly 3 years, right? Nearly 3 years. Now, I have probably around about 5 or so hours with Cornish a week. Maybe. That's right, what I have, right, with Cornish. It's a language that's related to a language I already speak, Welsh. I am still not at a full B1 level in Cornish. I can definitely say a number of things, but I'm not at a B1 level. So if you're looking at getting to where I am with Cornish in 3 years, which is kind of like through the A1, A2 material and towards a B1, then as long as you've got that in your mind, that that's the rate you're going at, great. But if you're expecting to be speaking the language very fluidly, very fluently, if you will, saying almost anything you want, a lot more has to be done. And I think that is the too time consuming, and the motivation therefore disappears. So that's the first one I want to sort of the myth, I think, that I want to kind of bust. And I think that is one of the biggest issues, is we perceive that people are learning languages way more quickly than they actually are. And people say that to me all the time. You learn languages really quickly. Well, if I have an intense period of study and then I get to use the language continuously afterwards, potentially yes. In terms of years and months or whatever you want to count it by. But in terms of hours I put in, it all ends up coming out very similar in the end. So if I do fewer hours, it takes me way longer. And also the good thing about doing it slower, so a slower pace when it comes to language learning means that you're more likely to retain it as well, because you've done it and repeated many, many things over a longer period of time. Whereas if I were to rush through it like I did with Estonian, and now I can barely say a word in Estonian. So, take on board that easy come, easy go with language learning, and it's definitely a slower process if you want to retain it, or if at least you're doing it quickly and doing it intensively. You need that intensity to carry on for a while so that you can cycle through all of the stuff you've been learning. Okay, let me just have a look and see what the other thing was here that I had. Okay, Tiffany says, I think perfection, or at least the pursuit of it, keeps people from succeeding at learning a language. If they make a mistake, it's too discouraging and they give up. Also, that unless you find some joy in it, the hard work doesn't seem worth it. Absolutely, Tiffany. Absolutely. Yeah, if you're not gonna look, if you're not enjoying it and you're finding it a chore, you're unlikely to put in those many, many thousands of hours you need to be exposed to the language, to be able to actually get anywhere where you feel content with what you're getting. If your goal is to speak it what you maybe describe as fluent, let's call that B2 level, to be kind of just to pick a level that I think is probably unarguably in an agreement for most people that you can do that. Perfection is an illusion. The issue with perfection comes down to when we're at school, from school age, from about the age of 7, I guess, our peer group and what they think of us and how we perceive ourselves in that peer group and in our groups that we then belong to, whether it's in school, out of school, at clubs or wherever, we become way more aware of how we're perceived and how we want to be perceived and what's embarrassing and things like that. So these psychological barriers start to really build up in our brains. And so what happens is we forget how we learnt our first language. We forget that we made lots and lots of mistakes and we were corrected incessantly by our parents, by our family members, by our teachers, whoever it was in your life who was correcting you, you corrected an innumerate amount of times in terms of to get where you need to be. And we forget it quite conveniently because it's wasn't that important to us. We didn't think about it. We just made a mistake, said, oh, yeah, okay, repeated the right version. And eventually, after getting it wrong several times more, got it right. But what we do is because it's something that happened in the past, we very often, like with our ideas of what we can do, we tend to look at the past and our past achievements with rose-colored glasses, and we look back and think, oh, that's what I can do. So that's therefore the norm, becomes the norm, right? This is what I can do. And if I don't do that, if I don't achieve this high level, and if I don't get an A in the test that I actually worked full out and gave up everything else to get the A for, but forgot about all of that because I got the A and was very happy, and it showed what I could do, and I then took that to be my norm. That's the kind of situation we get in as adults. We tend to forget the work that went in, we forget the things we got wrong, and we just remember the victories, and we set those, instead of being like here, us working at full pelt, doing our best, we take it as our norm. This is what I can do. And that's the dangerous thing with semantics, with words. This is what I can do. Yeah, it's what you can do if you work full time. It's not what you can do normally. So when we do our language learning, what we do is we take that can do at full pelt, take it as our normal. With language learning, we then don't meet that. And then we say, oh, maybe this isn't for me. Or no, I'm failing at this. Give up. No, this isn't working. But we forget the work that went in. And we also aim for perfection, as Tiffany says sometimes. People will often say, I want to speak perfect German or perfect English and have a perfect accent. Well, you're not going to have it. I've never met somebody who speaks English who's learned it later in life. And when I say later in life, I'd say they didn't go to high school in an English-speaking country. I've never met anyone, and it's the most widely studied language in the world, who has spoken to me and convinced me that they're not, that they're from an English-speaking country by their level of language. It's not happened. And if you imagine that for any other language, it's very, very difficult to do that. People will often give a lot of compliments very quickly and very easily. Met people who are native level, and people who even speak English to a level where they're more than capable of sort of doing work at the same rate as somebody who was brought up monolingually in an English-speaking education system and grew up in an English-speaking household and family. Absolutely, and sometimes they may even outperform in some of the of their work. That's the important thing, though. It's this ability, a native level ability, but being mistaken for native. This is the dangerous thing that I am very much against, and I don't understand why people want this. Our language and where we're from and our identity is who we are. It's part of who we are. It's part of our identity. Losing it may sometimes be desirable for certain individuals, particularly if you've got trauma attached to it. I get it, but it remains very often. It remains. As I say, the only time I've come across this where it's not been the case is some people who in maybe their teenage years moved to the UK and finished their education in the UK, and they sounded like somebody who just was born, raised in a UK household, went through the education system and wouldn't have known any different. But generally speaking, it's a very depends on the age and where the language acquisition device goes off in your brain to feel that language like in that way. A lot of things are to do with psychology as well. And to, if you know that you're not from a place, I mean, it feels a bit weird pretending you are, right? So psychologically, that's a very difficult thing to do. Also, why? I mean, there's no one better place than another in the world. It's just different. Everything's just different. And so doing it makes little sense anyway. But the point is that this perfection, I've never come across it. And even with monolingual speakers of a language like English or another, I've never met a monolingual speaker who speaks the language perfectly. The reason is we all make mistakes. So letting go of that is really important, because that's not happening, even if you know one language and that's it. Okay. So moving on to some of the other questions or some of the other comments that I got from Instagram. So somebody says, because there's always a hit through the grammar, kids alone. Yeah, grammar sometimes can become an issue. Depends on the language. Sometimes it's more or less of an issue. It just depends on how closely related a language is. But the grammar, sometimes you have to sit down and learn. One of my big pain barriers at the moment with learning Cornish is sitting down and learning the verb forms. I remember doing it in Spanish. I remember it being a pain. I actually have a very good memory of how painful it was and how long it took me to learn the Spanish verb forms. It was extremely tedious in stages to actually be able to use them, and it took a long time to just get through and to actually be able to manipulate the grammar to be able to express what I wanted to express. And I'm going through this at the moment in Cornish, and I recognize that. So yeah, that's another reason why when the going gets tough, we fail. We just drop off the boat. That's it. We fall off the wagon for learning the language, and so we stop. So that's another reason why I find people also stop learning the language. They feel like they failed. They got to a hard point. They prefer staying with the easy things of hello, my name is, yes, I'd like this, I'd like that. They can stick to their kind of Tarzan type speak in the language without conjugating the verbs properly, not worrying, but getting by, and that might be fine. And but the thing is this idea of fail, and I use the term fail very deliberately in the title of this, because it's one thing to accept that you want to communicate in a language and you don't worry about mistakes. It's another to say you failed. So you can communicate in kind of what we call like Tarzan speak, not conjugating verbs fully, speaking in a way that's kind of not grammatically correct, but the communication works somehow. People understand what you're saying and the message gets across and you can communicate. There's actually nothing wrong with that if that is what you're happy with and that's your goal. But what you have to recognize and what you have to be happy with is that what you're putting in results in that effect and that goal. If you have this as your input and you're expecting this as your output, you're going to be very disappointed and feel like you failed. But if you put this as your input and that is your output, they match, they go together. And so you can feel, okay, I'm trying to do a love heart now. There we go. You can feel the love, right? I'll do the love heart. So if they go together and they match, the love works, right? But if you're trying to do this and match, there's no love heart. It's kind of a weird triangle. It doesn't work. So you have to make sure that you have the work that you put in, what you put in, and what you expect to get out matching perfectly, or more or less, more or less perfectly. Because then you don't fail, you reach your goal of Tarzan speaking the language or whatever level you want to call it. And then you know that if you need to do more to reach this level and feel that you're speaking in a more sophisticated manner, and then you are happy with that. If you don't meet it, that's when the idea of failure sort of starts to seep in and you feel disappointed. It has a negative impact on you, your mental health potentially, and how you feel about the language learning and yourself. So it's important we do this. This isn't just for me saying blah, 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 blah about language learning. This actually has a real effect on you as an individual. Some of you will feel it more than others. And so that's absolutely natural too, because you're all individuals, but you'll all feel it in different ways as well. It will reinforce different feelings within you about your past, about how you feel about yourself, about things that you've experienced in the past or at present, and it can weigh heavy on you. So it's important we get this right. Make sure what you're putting in and what your goal is match up. Okay, it's really, really important. Really important. I can't stress that enough. That's like the most important thing, because when they match, it's amazing how different things seem. We do this in the language learning therapy sessions very often, and we're constantly talking about matching what we do and matching what the outcomes we expect, because that's the only way we ensure that we feel content with what we're doing, or at least make peace with what we're doing. Okay. Jeff Park says, hello, Richard. Many people may say motivation, not having at least 3 why learn reasons is my thinking. Potentially, yes. So not having why reasons can be important. It is absolutely valid to know why you're doing it. So if you don't know why you're learning the language and you're not then therefore doing anything towards it, then how do you buy into the argument of learning it? Well, how do you convince yourself that it's a waste? It's not a waste of your time. You can't lie to yourself about something. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here. It's kind of the difference between Gnosticism and belief. Okay, so you can say that you know or don't know something. Okay, you either know or you don't know. You might be able to say, I think I know, I believe, but then you're talking about belief. I believe I know, but you're not sure. But you either know or you don't know. So if I turn the light on, I know it's on. If I turn the light off, I know it's off, right? And you can kind of demonstrate that by turning the light on and off. So if you know why you want to learn a language, you can list the reasons, you know them very easily, you know the reasons why, and it's very easy to convince yourself of it. Same is true with belief. You can believe in things. You can be in terms of belief in religious terms, theistic or atheistic. And so theistic is you believe in the presence of a deity, of a god, and atheistic is you do not believe in you have the absence of a god in your belief, right? Now, you cannot pretend to believe if you don't believe. You cannot pretend to convince yourself that you know reasons why you're studying a language if you do not genuinely believe it. So pretending you believe in something really is a bit weird in terms of you're only fooling yourself, if you know what I mean. But you can't fool yourself because you know deep down what you believe or don't believe. It's yay or nay, right? So it's kind of like that with a lot more things than just religion. I mean, it's like that with believing in why you're studying the language, believing in the reasons and knowing the reasons why. So they could be reasons why, for example, that are very tangible. You need to get a visa, you need to move to the country, you need to get a job, you need to pass an exam. They're very tangible reasons why. So you know why you need to learn it, right? Or you've fallen in love. You could be doing it for love. They're very tangible reasons why. So you can then you then also believe in that because you know that that's true, and therefore you've bought into the whole thing. Your entire mind, your entire essence is bought into it. But if you pretend that you want to relearn a language for reasons that are not important to you because you don't believe in those reasons either, you neither know them or believe nor believe in them, then all you're going to do is you're sort of building a house on sand, where it's just slowly going to sink into the sand and it's not going to work. So yeah, believing in what you're doing and knowing why is super, super important. Language Blick says no discipline. Yeah, I think the no discipline thing is to do a lot with um, a lot of when you find that you've got the motivation because of the belief in what you're doing and the knowledge of why you're doing it, and you know how to incorporate it into your life, the discipline should follow because you're getting the reward. And you also understand then when you understand the reward for what you're putting in and you accept that, it's kind of like a contract with yourself that you get. And so you tend to just do it, and you need to change this isn't something that's constant. Okay, this isn't, you don't just agree this once and then that's it. This changes because sometimes you're sick and your input is this, so you've got to expect this as your output, or even that your output will regress because you'll start forgetting things. There's attrition with language learning as well. So you've got to agree this constantly with yourself about what you're putting in and what you're getting out. This isn't a one-off thing that you do. This is a thing that you do constantly. The idea of discipline, though, and actually getting things done, it's setting things that are realistically achievable for you. And I think probably if this is an issue for you as an individual, some of those micro habits that I think, the atomic habits idea that has been around for a while now, some of those are actually really good tips. So this idea of 15 minutes a day is exactly that. It's kind of a micro habit. It's a version of the micro habits that you can all manage 15 minutes a day, right? Yeah. Okay. It's a micro habit that hopefully will grow and not just be 15 minutes a day. That's the point. It's like, I think in the atomic habits, one of the suggestions is you get in your car and you drive to the gym and you drive back. You don't go into the gym, you just drive to the gym. But the idea is that you will eventually feel stupid doing that and going to the gym, and you'll spend more because you've made the effort to actually get out of bed, get dressed, get washed, get dressed, get in the car, drive there, or get in the bus, go there. You will eventually stay at the gym and do your gym routine, or do part of a gym routine, or start on the road to a gym routine and start that as part of your process. And it's the same with languages. I mean, look, is no point staring at a list of 1,000 words and saying, I need to learn all of these words. Okay, and then writing them all out in a nice little book and making it look pretty. I mean, pretty things are pretty. That's all they are. And like many pretty things in life, they get old and they lose their appeal in terms of like how aesthetically pleasing they might be, because they change. They may become more appealing to some people's eyes because of the weathered look, because of how they've changed, but they change in terms of their appeal to you as the person writing it. So when we first do it, it looks amazing, right? We do it in a way that's pleasing to us. That will then change. We may or may not like it after a year or a month or whatever it is after we've done it. The problem with just making things pretty and writing lots and lots of words, and I see in no hate to Instagrammers who do this, because I absolutely adore how aesthetically pleasing some of these beautiful notebooks are. But until you've internalized that vocabulary, it's just blah blah on a page. And I have a gazillion of these notebooks at home, a gazillion of them. I mean, I've got loads of them. Many of them I've thrown away. I've just written all these words down and I've got through them all. And then all I have is a pile of books basically screaming at me from the side saying, you haven't learned what's in these books, and you know what's in these books, and you know how much you've forgotten, and you're failing at this language, and you're not learning it, and you're not internalizing it, and you're not doing it. And so the failure cycle starts again from that angle. And this is something that you really need to have control over. So language learning is overlearning. Language learning is repeating something to the point that it's in your head. And until it's in your head, it's not anywhere. It's just in a book for you to take a picture of and put on Instagram, or to look pretty somewhere. But if you're serious about learning a language, you actually have to internalize that and use it. So it's a waste of time. Well, not a waste of time completely, but it needs to be understood as this is the output, this is the result. Because if you're just writing out 1,000 words, you can't internalize 1,000 words that quickly. So you feel like you're doing this much and you're getting this much back. And you need these to match. Remember, need them to match. Need them to match to make your little love heart. There you go, look at that. I can do my love heart again. Okay. Go me and my love hearts. So you need to make them match. And this is really, really important. So consistency, yes. Micro habits, yes. Getting the dictionary and writing down every single word because you think you want to learn every letter, every word that begins with letter B today. No, don't do that. That's definitely a no-no. I think that's generally a no-no. Looking at the looking at words and how they interrelate and perusing the dictionary, not a problem. Seeing how words interrelate and how you can add suffixes, prefixes to change things up or down, fine. Go for it. Knock yourself out. Don't expect to memorize them all the first time around though. It takes time. You have to be in the language, listening to the language. That input is also important as well. So when Steve Kaufman and Steve Krashen talk about this comprehensible input, they're not doing it because they're being boring. It's true. Okay. You do need that as well. Lack of proper method or consistency. I think that is definitely what we just talked about now. So Andre, absolutely. Lack of method. I think, look, I'm not here to sell you a method of how to learn a language. It's not my job. There are lots of people who sell methods of language learning. All I can do is help to guide you as individuals with your questions and answer them. And hopefully each week, or if you join my groups in an individual basis, I can take you through the steps that you need as an individual to do that. And I hope that my words hit home each week for more and more people, and that it takes you to a new epiphany or way of thinking about your language learning that chimes for you, that works for you, that you can internalize, that works for you as an individual learner. Because what Luca does is fine. What Steve does, Steve Crash and Steve Kaufman, what they do, it's fine. What Mike Campbell does is fine. What Judith Meyer does is fine. What Lydia Machova does is fine. What Lindy Bortas does is fine. These are all fine. What Benny Lewis does is fine. What they all do is fine. But they're not all going to work for you. And that's the truth. That's the truth. There's no other way around it. That's just the truth. It's just the way it is. They'll work for some of you. They won't work for all of you, though. Some of the things Luca does drive me absolutely bonkers, and I couldn't do it. But I cannot at all ever deny how wonderful Luca is in terms of as a language learner, but also, I mean, he's a friend. He's as a human being, I love Luca. He's lovely. I don't just like him. I love Luca. But what he does sometimes with his language learning would drive me up the wall, and he knows that. I've told him that, and I've even said it publicly as well. So this is no shock revelation here. This is just true. Professor Arguelles, lovely. Alexander Arguelles, lovely guy. Some of the things he does would drive me nuts with language learning, but he achieves results. And if you listen to him and follow what he does, and you buy into his methodology, and it works for you, it's gonna work. Luca's methodology is gonna work. Lindy's way of doing it is going to work because it's worked for them. And I trust that they're taking you through a path that works for them. I could take you through a path that works for me. Thing is that my path actually often will differ depending on the language, depending on my situation, depending on my mood, depending on so many things. I don't do the same thing every single time. There are certain truths, absolutely, but seriously, it's always continuously changing. So Polyglot Plot says, because they give up before they get used to the language. Yep, that's another thing. So when all these things have gone drastically wrong, People tend to give up and say, that's it, doesn't work for me. And that's the shame. That's where I feel quite sad that it hasn't worked. And I always hope that they'll come back and do it. But they don't always. Look, I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I first started learning Spanish and I got to be at school and I started learning the verb forms, and I was like, maybe I'm never going to learn Spanish. Maybe it's just not going to happen. I'm never going to speak it. Maybe it's just not my language. Maybe there are languages that are not my language. That's also, I also entertain that idea. But I stuck with it for longer, and I really hammered it, and I spoke it a lot, and I made friends with people in Spain, and I went to Spain, and those people came and stayed with me in the UK, and slowly but surely, Spanish became part of my life. And here we are. Still is. And I love Spanish, and I love speaking the language, and I absolutely adored being in Mexico and using it with people. And Mexicans are lovely. They're so sweet. They're so nice. They're just so welcoming. And yeah, I mean, I love. What can I say? It's one of my favorite countries. Mexico is one of my favorite countries. One of my I have top 5 favorite countries. I've told you this before, I think, but yeah, Mexico's with my top 5. And Sophia also talks about the lack of consistency and lack of knowledge of methods, approaches that work best for you personally. Sophia, that is a wonderful, wonderful thing to say as a final note on Instagram, because that's absolutely a nice summary of what I said. What works for you personally is the important thing, and that's why people fail, because they try to emulate exactly how other people do it, but that isn't how things work. How you experience anything. If you imagine, right, imagine another thing that's going to be hopefully easier to sort of to conceptualize, I think, or to at least give us an analogy to this. I go to an ice cream parlor with you, and I say to you, my favorite, I mean, I absolutely adore chocolate. I love, so if there's a double choc chip, extra chocolate ice cream, I will have that. Okay. I will always take that. And I tell you, the best ice cream is that one. And I try and get you all to eat the same ice cream as me. You're not all going to be as enthusiastic or amazed by the ice cream that I choose for you. In fact, some of you may even be lactose intolerant, and it will have a really bad effect on you. Some of you may be allergic or whatever else to this ice cream. Some of you may absolutely hate the taste of chocolate. I mean, I can't imagine people like that. I joke, of course. But seriously, I mean, you're not all going to buy and eat the same chocolate as me, because you're not going to all want the same thing. You don't have the same taste. And the way you experience that taste is going to be different to the way I experience it. So when I eat chocolate ice cream, it tastes really nice. It releases endorphins. It makes me feel good. I enjoy every bite. I savor every bite. And for you, it might be like, I've got to eat it because I've paid for it. And if you imagine your language course or books a bit like that, I've got to use it because I paid for it, and you feel sick almost every time you even open it or think about it. You don't want to do it. You don't want to go through the course. You don't want to learn. It kills your motivation. It kills the whole thing for you, and it doesn't happen. You fail, and you feel like you failed, because it worked for that guy, right? Or that girl, or that person. It worked for them, but not for you. So what's wrong with you is the immediate thing, right? What's wrong with me? What have I done wrong? What on earth am I doing wrong that it works for these other people, not for me? Well, you wouldn't do that with the ice cream. You wouldn't say to me, what's wrong with me? He likes chocolate ice cream. Why don't I like chocolate ice cream? What's wrong with me? Am I a freak? There's something wrong with me? What's going on? No, you just have different tastes. Different things motivate you. Different things will be enjoyable to you or pleasurable to you, and other things won't, because they don't release the same endorphins. They don't get you going. They don't get you excited. They don't give you a will or desire or drive to go forward and to continually lick the ice cream until it's gone, and savoring every single lick or bite of the cone at the end. Instead, you will resent every single lick, and it will make you feel ill, sometimes actually physically ill, if you have a really adverse reaction to the ice cream. So that is my language analogy to ice cream. Hope you enjoyed it. I have lots of these silly analogies, I know. I hope you, but I hope with analogies it helps you to kind of internalize the message that I want to get across. Because I think that when we can conceptualize things in ways that are tangible to our own reality, I think that's where the magic happens. That's where you really get to yeah, you get what I'm talking about and what I mean, and also that you are not a failure. You can succeed. You can learn language. You already have. The fact that you are watching this video means that you have learned a language, even if it's one. You've learned a language. You have that in your head. You have this the whole idea of a language in your head, and you can do it. Okay. The final thing that I'm going to read is from Timothy Douglas on Twitter, who wrote, "Some people who succeed very well in language learning, especially English, to transmit information, understand transmitted information, fail to learn languages to connect with speakers and understand them better. This manifests itself in various ways. For example, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if it doesn't gel with you and you don't connect with the speakers and you're not communicating anything and it's just kind of, all very academic and etherical, then it's not going to be the same experience. Absolutely. And I think that is where I am with my thoughts on why people fail. Thank you so much for your patience in listening to me talk about this topic. It's possibly a topic we need to revisit a few times because it's a topic that's important and a topic that I think when we discuss it and we talk about what our real fears and motivations and drives and all this stuff is, what they all are, is it's where the magic happens. It's where we get to understand what's possible and what's not possible. Okay, I'm going to start on Instagram because I think I started on YouTube last time, and Instagram notoriously has a gazillion hello, joined, which hopefully I can get through. Hello. I'm not ignoring you if I don't say anything straight away, but I am going to do my best to get through as many of these as I possibly can. Where am I from? I'm from the United Kingdom. Why don't you give answer? I did. I speak for the first part of the so I always speak for the first part of these sessions so that I'm not answering random questions and just having a random live. I like to have a topic of conversation that I stick to, and then I come back and answer the questions afterwards. Good evening. I also don't say hello to everyone coming in because I think it disrupts the idea of a presentation. So please never ever feel that I am ignoring you on purpose. It's more, well, I am ignoring you on purpose, but never feel that it's personal because I will go back and I do appreciate your hellos and your likes and all that kind of stuff. I just need to make sure that I make this a useful live. I used to just do questions and answers, but it got in the very beginning, like 2 years ago when I first started this, but the request came in to pick a topic, and this was actually from you for me to do this way. So this is why I do it this way. I think it's a very good idea. If 15 minutes is not enough, what is the minimum per day? So Chris, when I say 15 minutes is not going to get you where you want to go, take it with a pinch of salt. So 15 minutes a day can do something, but make sure that you're happy with what that does. So, and how quickly it takes you. So 15 minutes a day is better than 0 minutes a day. So the atomic habits definitely kicks in. But if you really want to progress in a language, 15 minutes a day isn't going to get you speaking a language very quickly anytime soon, unless it's a very closely related language and you can make connections very quickly, because you're basically using the scheme or the sort of the template of a language you already know, and just transposing it on another language and just learning the differences rather than learning new words and new grammar. Yeah. Let me see. I waved. I've waved a lot. I wave a lot when I'm doing these. I do try and wave. A lot of people in monoglot countries give up when they encounter unfamiliar grammar. That's also true. Many English speakers actually don't know the grammar of English. So it's very, when they hear grammar, they kind of turn off. They think it's boring and they're not interested, and it's sort of, it almost isn't given a chance. And I think part of it is because a lot of the teachers aren't, or I taught the grammar either, so they don't feel so confident teaching the grammar. I've met many teachers who don't feel confident teaching grammar because they don't feel confident in it themselves, and so the cycle repeats. But absolutely, that is one of the reasons why people will definitely switch off if they feel bored. It needs to be taught in a way. So, there's a school of thought that the teacher is the one that's to blame if you don't learn. I don't 100% agree with that, because the person learning the language has to also bring something to the table. You can't go to a table empty-handed every single week after week after week after week and expect that the teacher just spoon feeds you the language. It's going to be very slow, and you'll probably give up because they may not be frequent enough in terms of the classes. So if you're doing nothing and you're just turning up, then that's not going to work either. But people do need to actually make some sort of effort. There's an effort required. There's something required to learn a language. I wish it was just that easy, that you just sort of do 15 minutes a day, or you just, and to a degree you can achieve something, but you have to then be happy with what you do achieve with that time, with not knowing the grammar or not wanting to go through some pain barriers of learning some things about the grammar, of how it works and why it's different to you. Otherwise, look, the method of just reading, yeah, I mean, clearly people do that and they read the language or are just in the language for a long time. I've met people who have learned languages like that. They've just picked it up because it's either similar, but there are some key differences in the grammar that they've never been explained to them and they never got them. I've also come across people like that. They have read extensively, they've listened extensively, they've spoken extensively over years. And I'm talking like over a decade. And because they never actually understood some of the key important features of the grammar at all, never read them, they were never explained to them by anybody because people understood them slightly differently to what they wanted to say, they never learned. And yeah, I've met people like that in real life, not in the language learning community, but outside. Okay, I thought this too until I met my ex-boyfriend who's Egyptian, and after flying in Australia, he sounds like an Australian and speaks at a native level. I am so surprised. That's amazing. I mean, if you hear that and you find that with your ex-boyfriend, look, I mean, just because I haven't doesn't mean that your experience of this is going to be different. Is going to be the same as mine. It could be different. I've never come across that, but I would definitely, I will, if that's happened for someone with you, they've learnt the language, that you can't tell the difference and distinguish them between, between other people who have just grown up monolingually in Australia, and 100% of the time they speak and you can never tell. I, I'm obviously surprised. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not surprised, because of other issues that come up for people who seemingly do that, because the cultural references are usually missing, and it's very difficult to plug those gaps. So to give you an example, for me, in the Balkans. I didn't grow up in Yugoslavia. My age group would have grown up partially in Yugoslavia. I don't know how to sing all of the Serbian songs at weddings, and so I am missing that element, that type of element, right? I understand the songs and I recognize a number of them now, but I can't sing them with all the other people of my age group. So no matter how well I speak the language and have learned, there are always going to be elements like that that are missing. I could probably sit down and learn them, but I don't think I want to. But there are then going to be things from TV shows, through comedy shows that are well known, that are talked about very, very sparingly, and it just is the way it is. You don't need to necessarily be native. You can be native level without being native. Native's actually very much overrated often. And in fact, in the UK, we don't talk about. So, for example, if you're looking to hire somebody in the UK, you cannot ask for a native speaker. You have to ask for a native level speaker of a language, because it's actually discriminatory to say native. And it's discriminatory for a very good reason. Some people may actually think of a home language they speak as their native language, and English. They've been educated through the medium of English all their lives and speak it like a monolingual English speaker. And in fact, other people would describe as a native speaker, right? But they might not call that their native language. And so if you put in a job advert in and you say native speaker, it's problematic. So native level is kind of where I go. But yeah, I mean, if you've experienced that, then I think it's wonderful for your ex-boyfriend if that's what his goal was and he's happy with that. And I've just never come across it. Let me see. I believe in my full potential and knowledge. Yeah, it's good. It's good to do that, to believe in your full potential and knowledge. Good to believe in yourself. Can you buy some things in Bulgarian for my boyfriend? Can you say some things in Bulgarian? Как искаш да казвам на български? За мен това е много нормално да говоря и български. Добре, всичко наред. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. Nice to see you. I am doing my best to get through all of these as fast as I can. I am learning Punjabi and managed to learn its alphabet. I intend to learn to read Punjabi in theory. In theory, harder than speech. Is literacy harder than speech? Depends on the language. So for Punjabi, I haven't studied Punjabi, so I can't say on Punjabi itself. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Just depends on the language. So for example, some languages have what we call diglossia. The spoken language is actually not like what people write. And so Finnish is a good example of this, where spoken Finnish and written Finnish are often quite different. They don't communicate using the same language as they would write, for example, in school or in a newspaper. They would use quite a different form. So it depends. Sorry to be annoying, but it really depends. Spanish, for example, is fairly straightforward in terms of you say what you see. There are obviously variations of Spanish where it's slightly different, but I mean it's fairly predictable. Muchísimas gracias. Como siempre, me ha dado nueva perspectiva. Muchas gracias, lo agradezco mucho. A ver, what do you recommend people when they get stuck in learning a language? Okay. Or now how do you assess what could help them? So that's always on an individual basis in terms of how I can help people, because it's absolutely impossible to give a blanket piece of advice that will work for everyone. And look, I mean, what I do here and what I do during my sessions is very much personalized and individualized for the people who have specific needs, and I need to understand your life, what you're doing, what's realistic for you, what's not realistic for you, what drives you, what motivates you. There are so many things that I need to understand about you as an individual to be able to help you properly and to do my job properly, if that's what I'm doing. That giving you a piece of advice, random piece of advice, it might work in some circumstances, but equally you might go away and say, oh, he told me to do this, but it's nonsense, it doesn't work. It's another reason why people buy lots of books and then don't use them, because they try them, it doesn't work for them, so they just give up. Often they haven't read how it's supposed to be used, because that's the boring bit, right? We want to jump straight into lesson 1 where we're saying something. We miss all of the phonology, we miss all of the instructions on how the book should be used. But that's also part of it. It's part of the problem that we have. So true. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So do we have to focus on grammar right at the beginning? Grammar is just part of the language. So, I mean, this idea of like grammar, vocabulary and stuff, I mean, look, grammar is just something that is there. And do you have to break your neck learning every single aspect of grammar? No, absolutely not. Of course not. I'm not expecting everyone to become, an ardent grammarian. It's not my goal. I think that you learn what you need for when you need it, is the thing. So, for example, when you teach children at school, when people teach them French, in the UK, they very often teach them je voudrais. Je voudrais is I would like. But you don't teach them the conditional mood when you teach them that. You just say, I would like is je voudrais. And that's it. Instead of saying to them, je veux, I want. Because if they're going to go and use it in a restaurant or in a cafe, it's nicer for them to say je voudrais, I would like. So that's really the kind of the crux of it. Is some parts of grammar you have to even let go if you're very into grammar. Let go of trying to jump ahead and jump down rabbit holes, and just enjoy the experience of learning the language to say what you need to say. Okay. Сложно для меня иногда, момент, иногда понимать, как русско говоришь я, это очень трудно. Как посмотреть? Там было. Ага. Что ты думаешь об этом? Ага. Только момент, потому что это очень маленькое для меня, поэтому говоришь, люди, люди, особенно дружбу. Когда ты в дружбе, да, это трудно, да, потому что надо говорить очень много, и надо быть с людьми очень много для этого, потому что, в принципе, это надо, это контакт с людьми, и без этого это невозможно продолжить с изучением русского языка. Я думаю, что только один вопрос для меня есть. Как я могу использовать еще раз или фразы, как повторить фразы, слова, грамматику, чтобы по-русски, например, чтобы я понял еще лучше другой день или другой недели, например. И поэтому надо только использовать этот язык очень часто. для этого, понимать еще лучше. Но надо только время для этого. Okay. Favorite languages. What's the language? What's the language most difficult? What's the most difficult language? Depends on which language you speak. For me, the most difficult language I've studied so far has been Georgian, but I think that probably I would find Greenlandic even harder. Yeah, because I'm an Indo-European language speaker, so I've focused mostly on those languages. I'm moving over to YouTube now. I got to the end of Instagram, so I'll do my best to get through everything, and then I will disappear. Do you think the internet instant gamification age is the problem too? Potentially, yes, France Gamble. Potentially is a problem because this idea of we need to do everything and get everything like this wasn't something I grew up on. It wasn't something that many of the people I mentioned as these language learners that have if you follow their techniques, they haven't grown up on it either. And so it's possibly not the coolest thing to say, but yes, sometimes the gamification can become more of a problem than a help. Yeah. Very true, unfortunately. Good question. And I tend to think it can be more of a problem. Not for everyone. Some people it works well for, it motivates them, but I've seen it more of a problem myself. But motivation does not really matter when a person migrates to a country. Once a person has migrated to another country, that person will constantly be surrounded and exposed to the language every day. Ewan, legit. Nope, I disagree. Sorry, I disagree. I disagree nowadays that is the case. So when somebody moves to a country, and I'm going to give you some examples. So when you move to a country, you can choose to be part of the community. You can choose to listen to things in local language. You can choose to go to clubs. You can choose to make friends. You can choose, or at least to make a big effort to do all of those things, right? Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we actually want to speak to people in our own language or languages. Sometimes people move to countries because they've moved there for economic reasons. They wanted to get a job, or they wanted to improve their chances for university, or they wanted to do something. But actually, their heart's not necessarily in it. They wanted to get to a point where they could use language, and that's that. For a lot of people, they will move to another country, and then with the advent of modern technologies and social media, what they do is they will create a bubble of their own language, their own culture, and make friends with people from the same places that they're from, or with an international group. And the international group thing has been an issue for centuries. So typically what would happen is you'd have these expat groups that sometimes can become a bit toxic. They will just complain about how bad everything is where they are. So you can get into those groups, and that doesn't work because then you're not taking in any of the language. And the language around you, instead of becoming a resource for you to improve, becomes white noise that you block out, an annoyance, a thing that you don't want to hear. And you just want to try and speak another language, usually English, but another language. The other groups would be people that just want to get on. They maybe know enough of the language to be able to do what they need to do in the shops, on the bus, for work, but actually they don't want to get involved any further into it. So they surround themselves during their social times with people that they can speak to in their own language or languages, and then watch TV, watch the news, follow the news from the country of origin or from a country that they feel attached to, and not the local or the country they're in and the language that they've been learning to go there. So that's actually harder now than it was when I was younger. When I went to live in France and studied at university, I heard no English. I mean, to call home was really expensive, and so I had to speak. That was kind of it. There was no choice. And I ended up living with Spanish people, so I spoke Spanish at home and French with my French friends, and didn't speak English for like a year. And in fact, I felt it when I got back to the UK. I was trying to find words in English that I hadn't been using for like a year. It was quite odd, but it's that's not the case nowadays. You can watch things in different languages wherever you are and create your own linguistic and cultural bubble and take it with you around the world. Okay, France, let's see. My friend planned a week in Mexico right after Christmas. She asked me to teach her Spanish in 2 months. Decided I was being too hard on her. Now she is in Mexico and can't understand them. Yep, doesn't surprise me. To 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 avoid quitting, I've tried to always ask myself the question: are you ready to spend more than a year with this language? Good question to ask yourself. Yeah, it's kind of like a pet is not just for Christmas, right? That's what they say. David just started learning French this week, but my problem is that I don't know how to learn a language. Should I learn phrases or should I learn individual words? I don't know what I should be doing. Now, that is a very long answer to that question, David, but for sure, learning phrases and things that you want to say. So just the individual words, it's not always that useful to just learn individual words. So learning them how to manipulate sort of sentences, je voudrais, for example, I would like, and then glace, or je sais pas, une bière, or un café, un croissant, je sais pas. So you could then mix it with different words then that you learn, but then make sure you're only learning words that you actually want to say and use and need. So they would be words that you things that you love, things that are related to your life and your existence, things that you hate as well, and things that you're allergic to when it comes to like food and stuff. So they would be the first things that I would learn, pretty much, and they will be different for every person, slightly different anyway. There'll be some things that are true, but yeah, learning those kinds of things because you're going to get to practice those the most often, I think. Hi everyone, I don't want to fail. No, and I'm sure you won't, chess mastery. Given you're a chess master, I'm sure you won't. So I don't even keep a time log of my languages. I just watch TV and podcasts and music. If I can understand it, then I know my studying is working. Absolutely. I don't either. So France Gamble, I don't actually follow how many hours. People ask me this very often. How much do you study? How often do you study? And I just study when I want to study, and I listen to things when I want to listen to things. It's a very natural process for me at this point, but I recognize that it is sometimes a habit that people have to get into if you're not used to that way of thinking about the languages. Ok. Silva. Querido Richard, você acredita que a escrita chinesa pode impedir a mandarim de se tomar uma língua internacional que reflita a importância da China no cenário global? É uma pergunta muito, muito boa, mas uma coisa que acho que tem, assim, acho que você sabe também que pode ser assim, difícil para a língua, para realmente até como um status assim, um nível global, porque como língua também tão difícil para escrever à mão, por exemplo, ou também às vezes não é mais fácil para escrever com, por exemplo, internet, isso, temos teclados para fazer isso, então isso sim é possível, mas acho que pode ser sim, pode ser um fator importante, porque às vezes agora eu vejo que as pessoas da China tendem a usar pinyin para escrever as coisas e logo somente identificar os caracteres que têm que usar para escrever alguma coisa, uma mensagem. Então, sim, pode ser. Let me see. Do you need to find a course of material to start with, David? Okay. Yeah, French answering. Thank you very much for answering. Writing Mandarin can easily be difficult if you use kanji for years. Japanese take notes. Now after that, I'm learning Mandarin. It's also efficient. Interesting you say that, Franz Gamble, that you think it's efficient. The thing that I find really interesting is when you see these things of you see videos on the internet of Chinese speakers trying to write basic things, like products that they don't normally write, and they find it very hard to write it by hand now. So it does make me wonder whether the opinion, like writing in Latin letters, will be, I hate to say it, because I don't necessarily want this. I'm just observing, right? I'm just observing what I'm seeing. I don't know where that will take us. I have no idea. Yeah, we're not perfect in our native languages exactly. Our books. I know some Scandinavians who sound like native English speakers. Cool, JR. There'll be people who I mean, I hear this a lot. I just personally have never met one. But yeah, I do hear people say this to me. Yeah. There are some pay apps as well, Pimbley. Okay, that's another one for you. Thank you very much. I want to be able to read Punjabi literature. Okay, I saw that on Instagram. My goal is to just speak and listening, not to be able to speak with native. Okay. I think this is a conversation which I love that you're having this conversation. It's so nice to see you helping each other. I really like that. Thank you. Okay. Just to add, I've managed to learn some Punjabi alphabet. It's called Gurmukhi. Learning a new alphabet is not a problem for me. Then if you find it appealing and interesting, then you're probably not going to have as much of an issue with reading and writing if you enjoy it. A lot of it is to do with whether or not you naturally enjoy something, right? Richard, if somebody knows Spanish up to B1 level, would the process of learning Portuguese be faster? Absolutely, of course. Yep, because you're going to have words in common and vocabulary and words in common, and also grammatical concepts that you're going to be aware of from Spanish. So it will help, absolutely. I'm pretty competent in 3 languages: Czech, Italian, and German, and I feel that the absolute limit of what I can maintain, I couldn't contemplate adding another language. Then I think don't. If John, if that's how you feel and you feel comfortable with it, then that's absolutely fine. Look, no one comes around and gives you a prize for speaking a number of languages. I mean, you learn languages for your own enjoyment or for your own needs. So there's no right or wrong. There's no number that you have to learn or don't have to learn. You can still get involved in conversations about language and learn whatever you want. Because the knowledge of even one language, if you just speak one language, right? You can constantly learn new things about the one language that you speak if you're a monoglot. Monolingual people can absolutely continue to teach me things and teach themselves things. So there's no right or wrong for this. I'm a very firm believer in that. I do my listening and shadowing when I go to physical therapy. I walk every day. It helps to focus in language instead of over connecting my balance. Yeah, I can imagine that's really useful. People have told me about the shadowing, which is Professor Arguellas's one of his techniques that he uses. So if you're ever interested in learning about it and you haven't heard of it, you probably have heard of Professor Arguellas before me. But if you just put in shadowing technique, Alexander Arguellas, Arguelles, then you'll find his videos very easily. Ron, hey Ron, good to see you. Thank you, Richard. Always a pleasure to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you very much. You guys are all inspiration. Yes, Ingrid, I agree. They are absolutely wonderful. I love all of this. The sound is lagging. Oh dear, was it lagging? I'm sorry. Which my daughter is in Spanish immersion school for 6th grade, but she refuses to speak Spanish. How can I get her to be more confident? Wow, France Gamble, that's a very long answer to that question. Acknowledging that she doesn't want to speak and talking to her about it is probably good. But saying that, for example, if you're speaking Spanish, it depends which language you speak to your daughter in. But if you're speaking to your daughter in Spanish, I don't know which language you're using, then you just carry on speaking as normal. And you say, look, if you want to speak in another language, and if you want to speak in a different way, that's fine. So yeah, when my daughter did that, for example, she did it a few times where we would be speaking Spanish, and I would just say, look, we'll Daddy's speaking this way. If you want to, you're very welcome to, but you don't have to. You just have to listen, and that's it, and reply. There's no pressure, and it worked out fairly well, because she ended up just using it the whole time and came out speaking it. So yeah, it's positivity and not kind of demonizing the language or pretending you can't understand, or none of those tricks work. Positive encouragement, sometimes with younger kids. I mean, 6th grade is getting a bit older, but like when my daughter was younger, it would even be like saying things like, "Oh, what a shame that you can't, you don't understand, because I was going to get you something." Kind of like mild bribery. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, there are definitely ways and means of doing that. But it's possibly a longer conversation, and I'd need to know more about your individual situation to be able to give you proper advice. Hi Richard, what are your thoughts about creating own sentences in English and translating them into the target language with Google Translate for making own dialogues or text? Sebastian, I can't say that I'm a huge advocate of doing that, simply because if you just use Google Translate, you're going to probably end up with things that don't make as much sense or are not natural in the other language. So learning how they say or express a certain thing is probably better, and then figuring that out and then using that structure instead. So yeah. Translate or choose language, yes. Okay. Oh, the sound's been cutting out, has it? Oh dear, I'm so sorry. Just put language. Okay. How Richard, can a person learn by trying to translate content they want to target language? I've procrastinated so far. I've been watching and reading has become any advice. Yeah, translating isn't. I mean, the goal really is to think in the way of the language, because every language will express things in slightly different ways, and so trying to put your own linguistic sort of rituals to express things and culture is not necessarily speaking that language. It's using words to go over the language that you already speak. So I'm always very careful about sort of that. This is particularly a problem in certain languages where there is a very different way of expressing ideas to particularly English. Okay, unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappear. I hoped I'd get to the end, but I haven't got to the end. I apologize for not getting to every single question on YouTube, but I got to most of them, and I hope you will forgive me and join me again next week for another go at talking about languages. And feel free to write any things that you want me to talk about, and I will take it all into consideration for next week. Until then, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your weekend if you're still in the weekend, and a great week, and good luck with your language learning. And I will look forward to seeing you again here in a week's time. Happy language learning. Thank you very, very much for joining me, and for all of the likes, and for any shares that you give, or any comments that you leave. It all helps the algorithm, and it helps me reach more people to let them also know that you can also succeed in language learning, and failure is just something that we need to get rid of and understand. This equals this, and then we don't feel like we failed. Okay, take care everyone, all the best, bye bye.